Ever felt like an unelected cabal of intelligence organizations are shaping the world and what we're supposed to see, hear, or think? If you do, you're not alone. And that might also make you a Bitcoiner. Let's mine deep state. Some people like to call it a conspiracy, but the deep state is simply an observation of a permanently installed and unelected managerial class working in high positions within government. Judges, cabinet members, and heads of organizations all generally need to be elected or appointed by sitting congressmen and senators. The rest, however, aka the deep state, are generally chosen and hired. The deep state doesn't come and go depending on who runs the White House. People like Anthony Fauci served under 6 of the last 6 presidents. Or John Negroponte, who served under Obama, Bush, Clinton, and Reagan in various ambassador positions, as well as Director of National Intelligence. Now, just because these individuals and thousands of others like them served under multiple governments for decades, doesn't automatically implicate them in any crimes. But it does give them undeniable tenure and authority to their higher-ups, many of which, like Obama or Trump, rely on their expertise in lieu of sharing a similar level of government experience at the time. They've also more or less been granted bipartisan immunity for the times they have knowingly misled the public on things like weapons of mass destruction or the origin of certain viruses, because these bureaucrats secured their positions outside a democratic process. They're generally able to act without public oversight, skewing policy towards secretive or self-serving ends, or diminishing individual freedoms by prioritizing national security over civil liberties. Just so I don't sound like the Latina version of Alex Jones, let me give you some tangible examples of these 2 people I previously mentioned. Anthony Fauci, who ran the National Institute of Allergy and Infectious Diseases for nearly 30 years, was also a leading advisor on Operation Warp Speed. This was a Trump-era public-private partnership that led to the record-fast clinical studies and manufacturing of shots administered during the pandemic, of which companies like Moderna raked in over $36 billion in revenue, later securing Fauci's government agency hundreds of millions of royalty payments. Kind of makes sense why he was knocking on doors for photo ops back in 2021 now. Then there's John Negroponte, a key figure in multiple US foreign policy decisions, like backing and arming Contra forces against the Nicaraguan government in the 80s, or shaping intelligence policies through the early 2000s in regards to Iraq and Iran. Guess where Negroponte works now? As vice chair of McLarty Associates. Guess what McLarty Associates was a major paid lobbyist for? The Nord Stream 2 pipeline. However, they pulled their relationship with the energy companies lobbying for Nord Stream 2's development in February of 2022. And exactly 7 months later, well, no more pipeline. So why should you care? And also, what does any of this have to do with Bitcoin? Let's be real here. The White House, the Senate, the Congress, they're all revolving doors. 60% of the United States senators become lobbyists after leaving office. And why wouldn't they? The #1 consumer and employer in the entire country is the government. Things need to be bought and people want jobs. But the dirtiest aspect of all of this is that the government is not the same economic actor as you or I or even Amazon. When they want to buy something, if they can't get enough support for it, they manufacture it. You know what I'm talking about. And the ability to buy or fund basically anything their heart desires is only enabled by the fiat system. Bitcoin is a cure because it's the only form of money that can't be printed on the back of taxpayers, many of which never got a chance to vote for any of the people making some of the biggest economic, foreign policy, and legal decisions in the country. If you want to put a cap on the deep state, the first place to look is their lifeline. Follow the money. Don't miss Dave Smith Backstage. Is there a peaceful path to dissolve the deep state in our lifetimes? And what could that look like?
I sure hope so. You know, I sure hope there's a peaceful path. I'll say that, look, the Soviet Union was one of the worst governments in the history of the world, and it mostly peacefully. I know mostly peaceful has been a corrupted phrase now. Everyone just thinks of like riots in 2020, but it did mostly peacefully collapse. And I hope that hopefully our system can go through something similar to that. You know, communism was unsustainable, and at a certain point, even though like there was debate amongst like the elite in the Soviet Union about whether they should forcefully keep the thing together or not, and ultimately they were just like, look, we got to just let these people go. They're separate ways. I'm hopeful that that's going to be something similar to that will happen in America.
And can Bitcoin adoption play a role in undermining the deep state?
Yeah, 100%. I mean, look, the whole, not just the deep state, but every layer of corruption in the government is all built on government control of money. And that Bitcoin is, and I'm not like trashing other cryptocurrencies, but I think that none of them have figured out what Bitcoin has. And Bitcoin is the only one that's truly like positioned to replace that. So yes.
There's a lack of Bitcoiner representation in the libertarian events. Why is that?
Because separation of money in the state is the most important issue, you know? I mean, that's like everything trickles down from that. The government's ability to print money out of thin air for any expenditure they want is why they're able to fight 20-year wars in Afghanistan, or they're able to have lockdowns here at home because they can just print money and pass it around.
Since you went into the Federal Reserve, rabbit hole, what are one of those findings that have blown your mind, and do you think we can put an end to it?
Okay, well, first off, the findings that blew my mind, I mean, were everything about how it works. Like the idea that it was privately owned, that it is privately owned, that we don't even know who the owners are, that we don't even have any type of auditing system. We don't know how much money they're creating, how much money they're passing out. We essentially only know what they decide to tell us. That already was crazy. Then figuring out kind of like the Misesian boom-bust cycle, like the idea that the reason why we have these economic crashes is because they create these artificial booms. And this was like right around that time the 2008 crash happened, and I saw like how much it devastated people. And so that was like eye-opening to me. And in terms of like, what like the case for optimism, I mean, I don't know, I see people waking up to how corrupt this system is on a scale that would have been unimaginable just a decade ago. So I have very little kids. I feel like I don't have an option to be pessimistic. My job is to make sure they have a good life. And I see all of this, all these people coming together, just being at a conference like this. And I'm like, yeah, no, there's a reason to be optimistic that, sure, we can do this. That humanity has been in far worse positions than we're in right now and come away. Like, it would have seemed insane to think slavery could ever be abolished a few hundred years ago. And yet we did that. So I'm optimistic. I think the good guys are going to win. Well, I mean, look, there's a lot of different things you can do, and you got to figure out what like your thing to do is. But look, man, pull your kids out of government schools, raise your kids, and love your kids. That to me is always like the number one thing. I think that buying Bitcoin, I think speaking up against, the corruption, I think your voice is more powerful than you can possibly imagine. And there is some, like, telling the truth is a power greater than anything else that humans possess. So that's it. Speak up, tell the truth, oppose the corruption, and raise your kids well. That's where I would start.